Flex-A-Lite Extruded Core radiator and fan system is probably one of the most simplest and effective upgrades you can do to your GM muscle car. Now, they actually make these radiators and fan systems for about any vehicle, but in particular, this is about the GM muscle car. Now, specifically, this setup was built for the GM or Chevrolet Chevelle 68 to 72, which would be considered the GM A-body. Now, we actually installed it in our Oldsmobile 442 71 model. Now, if you know anything about GMs, then you know that the Buick, the Oldsmobile, the Pontiac, and the Chevrolet are pretty much all first cousins. So there's not a lot of difference between the Chevelle / SS and the Oldsmobile Cutlass / 442, the Buick Skylark and GS, as well as the Pontiac Lemans and GTO. So all of those cars are pretty much, I would say, first cousins, if not brothers. Now, there are some differences, but there's more similarities than there are differences. So there wasn't a lot of fabrication to actually install this in our 442. Now, what Flex-A-Lite originally planned this for was to install this in LS conversions or LS swaps in Chevelles. Now, really and truly, this is effective for your small block or big block car as well. So not just for LS, but down the road as well in our 442, while we right now still have the old, rocket motor in the Oldsmobile, we will be doing an LS swap in that. So you're going from basically a front-driven motor, motor-driven fan to now you need an electric fan. So that's why we turned to Flex-A-Lite and looked at their number one, their extruded core radiator, which is going to cool a lot more effectively and efficiently, as well as their fan system where they're running twin 13.5-inch fans. And we're talking 4,600 CFM. That's a crazy amount of CFM that never was the motor-driven fan going to pull through the original shroud that you see here. Again, GM, with their radiator system and their clutch fan or a direct-driven fan, did quite well as long as you weren't doing too many performance gains or stuck in any traffic or anything like that. Now, if you look at our original radiator here, this is what came out of the 442. So, yeah, it looks great, I know. No problems whatsoever. Actually, it cooled pretty well, but you could see there were some leaks that had already started there, and actually through both sides you could see. And basically the old radiator system in these GM muscle cars where you had a 2-row, a 3-row, and a 4-row radiator, a 4-core, if you will. The 4 cores were a lot of times in the big block cars with air conditioning, so that was kind of the primo is what you wanted. This is actually a 3-row or a 3-core radiator, and it was flowing decently, but again, if you were in traffic and you had the AC going, then you would see the temperature start spiking, and you know that either you had to kind of rev the car up a little bit or actually get it going and get some airflow actually through that grill to cool this thing down. So we definitely wanted something that was more efficient. We also used to have the transmission lines for the automatic transmission coming through the radiator. With the new Flex-A-Lite Extruded Core design, they don't have the transmission bungs in there, so it's not passing the hot transmission fluid through the radiator. But with Flex-A-Lite and their history of actually knowing how to cool things down, they actually build transmission coolers as well. So you can buy those for your car, which we actually installed in the 442 as well, with an actual little electric fan built onto that as well. So going to cool that separately with the transmission. Now, what does the extruded design do? Well, basically these old 2-row, 3-row, 4-row designs were literally separate little oval passageways of fluid that were separated, and actually fluid flowed through those independently and connected by these 2 tanks here on the side. Everything soldered or brazed together, and then these fins kind of connected everything as well. Well, the new extruded design is basically one big passageway that's divided into multiple passageways, so you get a lot more fluid flow across those 2 tanks and across that, as well as their louver design on the actual fins where it connects those passageways is a lot more efficient and effective as well. A lot of design gone into it, a lot of engineering gone into it to actually give more surface area, more cooling capacity to dissipate that heat out of the fluid and out of the engine, keeping your engine cooler or really in a sense at that optimal temperature. Because when you go to looking at the LS swaps, the old adage in these old cars, you know, your old small blocks, big blocks, was, hey, put a 160-degree thermostat in it, get it as cool as possible, get, you know, a denser air, if you will, and keep that engine cool. Well, then that gave you kind of a wide span of 160 to say 210, 220, where you could kind of play in. A little different nowadays when we're looking at, you know, LS swaps, and we're looking at, you know, newer engines, if you will. There's kind of an optimal temperature range where you want that at 205, 210 degrees, and quite frankly, that's where most of your thermostats sit as well. So that gives you a smaller margin of error as well from optimal temperature and when you're overheating. So you really need to be able to cool effectively and efficiently that power plant to keep you in that optimal window and to keep you from spiking over into that overheating range as well. So again, something like the extruded design is going to work very well at that. Also, these old radiators probably had a burst strength of say 35 pounds, maybe 45 or 50 if you were lucky. Even some aftermarket stuff are going to burst somewhere around 50. The new Flex-A-Lite radiators, they withstand 100 PSI for burst strength. You can see the welding and brazing on these things are top notch. Actually done right here in the USA, so USA built, so kudos for that. Now, as far as the expense on this, yeah, you're gonna spend north of $1,000, but again, you know, is oiling your engine important? Well, cooling it ought to be as well, especially when you're looking at stepping up into an LS platform and maybe wanting to build 500, 600, 800 horsepower. You know, you want to put a turbo, you want to put a power add or a supercharger on it, something like that. You're going to be building big numbers. You better be cooling it as well. And again, keeping that from overheating and keeping that from damaging the power plant. So for our 71 Olds 442, it's going to be a daily driver for a college student now that he's restored it. So it needs to be reliable. It needs to cool really well. So that's the idea of basically ditching the old radiator system that was in it, that was tired, worn out, get rid of the old shroud as well, and replace it with that Flex-A-Lite radiator, the Extruded Core radiator, and the new electric fan system. I won't get into the detailed instructions because it's very simple. Again, as far as fabrication, the only thing we did was basically filleted that top radiator mount that bolts right to the top of the radiator core support. Very easy to do that, or you could have kind of fabricated your own out of a piece of sheet metal or aluminum. Probably could have even made this work. But as far as actually mounting it, that's pretty much all we had to do. And then it was run electric, and pretty much a power and a ground to it that runs to the fan controller if you're getting the fan controller. You can also wire this into either a factory harness if you're running like an LS factory harness, or if you're running like a Holley system, something like that can run fan controls. You can absolutely wire into those fans, or you can get the Flex-A-Lite controller that's a little bit more, I think, for than the bare fans, but it's not too much, and actually has variable speed fan control on it. Very easy to wire that. And in fact, we followed the instructions, but I actually tucked the wires, drilled some holes, and actually tucked the wires into the shroud and kept them nice and neat, and zip tied those in there because I just wanted to hide them for the most part. So I basically had them coming out of the controller, and all four of the lines, the positive and the negative, as well as the two fan control wires, tucking into the shroud and then running down the shroud and exiting near the battery. But again, as far as running wires, that's pretty much all you need is a power and a ground. The other two wires in the system are actually going to go to the fans themselves. And then also you're going to have either some type of temperature control to tell the unit when to come on. We used the probe that actually came with it. We just slid it through the fins in the radiator very carefully and then stuck it out about an 1/8 inch, I think is what they call for. So those two wires are actually going to plug into the fan control module. And then again, kind of a key on source as well. Just tell that controller when the key's on so that then it knows it can kind of arm the system, if you will. Now it's pretty cool that when the temperature does get up to range, say 185, I think is what it comes preset, and then you can easily adjust that if you want to higher or lower. But at 185, the fans come on at 60%. And then over a 10-degree window, so if that temperature keeps climbing, once it gets up to 10 degrees, it's going to be at 100% as far as fan speed. So it's pretty cool that it doesn't just come on at 100%, comes on at 60%, and then ramps up as that temperature continues to climb, so it can kind of keep that or get that back under control. And I will tell you, our fans, basically, they'll kick on for a few seconds and kick off when the car's sitting there idling. So it cools it very, very well. And then as far as, so wiring is very easy. As far as fabrication of putting in, that was very simple as well. The fan unit I really like because it had a big rubber molding on there that actually sealed it very well to the radiator. It's also not going to eat into it. It doesn't have any penetrations going through where you have to, put those plastic things through like a lot of them you have to. So no penetrations actually through the radiator itself where it's going to be rubbing or anything. So we're really excited about it. I believe there's a 2-year warranty that Flex-A-Lite gives as well. But we've actually been driving it for a few months now and zero problems. Now, I will say you can see from our pictures and video here that we basically kind of did a mock setup and ran it for a while. So you see the rusty water that came out of our actual engine and kind of flooded through the radiator and stained it pretty bad. So it looks kind of nasty on the inside, but it looks a lot nicer than kind of the pictures are showing it. But that's why you see the rusty water. Now we've got some nice coolant in there, and so it's not going to have that rusty water circulating through it anymore, and we'll actually continue to flush that out. So we'll try to get a lot of that rust removed, but be careful with that. If you're trying to keep it really nice and you got an old power plant like we had that used to have just water running through it, a lot of contaminants that are in there, a lot of rust. Probably the best thing to do would be flush that out. But again, we're very happy with the Flex-A-Lite, the extruded radiator system. Works very, very well. We've had no issues with it. Fans work excellent. Again, 4,600 CFM, pretty amazing as far as drawing that much air through it. And we're running a vintage air system as well. So we've got a condenser coil in front of the radiator it's pulling through as well. Does a great job with that. I will say on this setup, I wish we would have gotten a trinary switch, which is basically another wire that we can pull from the AC controls to tell the fans to come on, because right now they're not coming on when you turn the AC on. So when you're idling, you may not get that AC working good because you've got no air coming through the condenser unless the car is hot enough to actually kick the fans on. So remember that, to get you a trinary switch, or know how to wire that from the AC compressor to the fan controller. And then you have to know whether it's on a negative system or a positive system, and then it's basically 2 different pins on the fan controller that you use. Again, their instructions for Flex-A-Lite are very simple to wire all this up if you're using their fan controller, and if not, you can use whatever fan controller you're using with the software you're using, or with the stock setup, say off a GM controller. So there you have it. Check out the Flex-A-Lite extruded radiator system and fan system. Also keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Have a great day, and go out and do something nice for someone.